The French Revolution, regarded as one of the most bloodiest revolutions to ever occur, filled with fear and anger. But how did this revolution even occur in the first place? Well, to know this, we got to go all the way back to when the 7 Years' War was happening. In this war, the British and the French were fighting over land claims in the region of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, which the French had lost, but they had also spent a large amount of money on the war with nothing to show for it. So when King Louis XVI came to power in 1774, he wanted to get revenge on the British. So when the opportunity came, he aided the Americans during the American Revolution. Unfortunately for King Louis, when the Americans won, they didn't pay him back until, after he was dead. This plunged France into even more debt. Also didn't help that the Queen, Marie Antoinette, was spending a lot of money on lavish things for herself, such as making her hair into a boat. And when she was told that her peasants couldn't eat because bread wasn't available, she told them, let them eat cake, thinking that would help them. This made the Queen very unpopular with the people. There was also a series of droughts through 1774 and 1788 that prevented France from growing and selling crops, and also making bread. This put them into even more debt. Panicking, King Louis XVI summoned the Estates General, which hadn't been summoned for 100 years, to help him to solve France's financial situation. The Estates General were made up of 3 states: the First Estate, the Second Estate, and the Third Estate. The First Estate was made up of the nobility, the Second Estate was made up of the clergy, and the Third Estate was made up of peasant farmers and wealthy business owners. The Third Estate also made up 98% of France's population. They all met up in Versailles, but when they got there, they all started to argue whether to make votes equal or to count by head. But since the Estates General originally voted equally, they just went with that. The Third Estate found this to be very unfair, since they would always be voted out by 2-1. So being 98% of the population, they declared themselves the National Assembly. The royals locked their meeting hall, thinking that was going to stop them from meeting up. But the National Assembly just went down the street and found another building. The building they chose happened to be the King's Indoor Tennis Court. When they were all there, they made the tennis court oath, which basically said they'd never give up until the government made a new constitution. King Louis XVI told the other states to join the assembly, but he also started gathering troops around Versailles. The National Assembly saw this and started to panic, thinking that they were all going to arrest them and execute them. So they decided to raid the Bastille, a fortress that was also a political prison, to get guns, cannons, and gunpowder to protect themselves and to gain authority. In the pursuing conflict, 94 people died, and it so happens that they cut off the governor of the Bastille's head off and put it on a pike. The storming of the Bastille signaled the start of the French Revolution, and it showed the monarchs that the people were serious. And in the next months, the Assembly proposed the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen to King Louis in the summer of 1789. But King Louis, being stubborn, refused to sanction the document. This enraged the people, and a crowd formed and marched from Paris to Versailles to bring the royal family back to Paris. When he was in Paris, he sanctioned the new constitution on August 6, 1789. The king in private thought the revolution would blow over and burn itself out, but in public, he acted like he supported the revolution, and he looked like he was ready to become a constitutional monarch. King Louis, looking like he did support the revolution, made him more popular than ever with the people, and the National Assembly even proclaimed him as the restorer of French liberty. But King Louis did have some resistance to some demands, and because of this, the royal family was relocated to another palace in Paris. Then King Louis, with his wife, tried to flee the country to go to Austria, because Marie Antoinette was Austrian. But unfortunately for them, they were caught at the border and brought back to Paris. Then King Louis was stripped of his title of constitutional monarch. Then other monarchies, like Great Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, and the Holy Roman Empire, started worried that revolutionary ideas would spread to their country and overthrow their own monarchy. So in 1792, war broke out between France and Austria because of some tensions. Then the Austrian commander made a manifesto saying that Paris would be destroyed if the royal family's lives were in danger. And then revolutionaries started to surround the palace that the royal family was living in, and they imprisoned him. On September 21st, the new assembly, which was called the National Convention, abolished the monarchy and formed a French republic. But first, let me give you a quick rundown of the new National Convention. The National Convention was divided between the Girondins and the Montagnards. The Girondins were less radical, and they were blamed for most military losses. And the Montagnards were more radical, and they wanted to help lower classes. The Girondins were eventually driven out the convention, and the Montagnards held power. The Montagnards were also aligned with the group called the Jacobin Club, which was a group run by someone named Maximilien Robespierre. The Jacobin Club was considered very radical, with Maximilien Robespierre making people enemies if they didn't agree with his ideologies. Robespierre was one of the main reasons why there was so much death and suffering in the revolution. In November of 1792, it was discovered that King Louis was making secret dealings with counter-revolutionaries, and he was set to appear in trial. After 2 appearances, he was found guilty and sentenced to death by guillotine on January 18, 1793. 9 months later, Marie Antoinette would meet the same fate. After the king's death, the Montagnards were left to deal with France's situation, and in 1793, Robespierre took position in the Committee of Public Safety. This meant that he basically had dictatorial control over the government. And he did a couple things. He changed the calendar, he shut down all the churches, and he oversaw the signing of a new law, which basically stated that a suspect wouldn't be given a public trial, and the jury only had 2 options, acquittal or death. This law started a horrific and bloody period in the Revolution. This period was called the Reign of Terror. During the Reign of Terror, around 300,000 people were arrested, 17,000 people were executed by guillotine, at least 10,000 people died while being held captive. This chaos started to make Robespierre very unpopular among his followers and his colleagues. Then on July 27, 1794, Robespierre went up to the Committee of Public Safety and announced to everybody that he had a list of people that were meant to die on the guillotine, but he wasn't going to show anybody who was on the list. This started to make everybody fear and wonder who was on the list. So they surrounded Robespierre's office where he was during the time and wanted to arrest him. When Robespierre noticed this, he tried to commit suicide via a gunshot wound, but he missed his face and only grazed his chin. Robespierre's face was bandaged up and his mouth was shut, so he couldn't talk for the rest of the night. Then on the next day, he was sent to the guillotine and then his head was cut off. Robespierre's death marked the end of the Reign of Terror, and the National Convention was in the process of being replaced by the Directory of France. The Directory of France attempted to fix France's economy, but failed to do so. This paved the way for someone named Napoleon Bonaparte, who at this point had the complete support of the military and the people, to start a coup and overthrow the Directory. This event marked the end of the French Revolution and started a new era that was called the Napoleonic era.